excluding the idea of a group of people winning as one contingent. So I'm not sure if it's an award, why you wouldn't want to just give it to one recipient in one year and then in a subsequent year potentially acknowledge somebody else.
I think we were leaving the options open for it. It's a little bit different than particularly the environmental awards are just recognizing one person. It's sometimes quite a group, and maybe it isn't a group. So it was a way to know. So it was just a consensus of the committee that they would like to have that opportunity, particularly as the awards are not going to be given every year. So that would give that option, and if it was only once per term, to acknowledge several people.
Thank you for your answer, unsolicited, to the first one about unsung hero. I fully support the notion of acknowledging the unsung hero. I would just suggest that perhaps some additional wording could be included to make it clearer that it is intended for someone who is behind the scenes as opposed to a significant contribution, because that indicates to me it could be from, because it even says leadership and or effort. It would be pretty hard to be a leader of an organization and be an unsung hero in the background. I mean, you can be a leader, of course, but the type of leadership. So I just offer that in the spirit of trying to get clarification on what an unsung hero award would be.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that back.
But I totally support it, and I thank very much the council and the committee's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Any more discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, so let's come to the end of the council portion of our agenda. So we need a motion to adjourn council and move to committee of the whole.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That motion carries unanimously. And I'll now like to invite Councillor German to sit in the chair of the committee of the whole meeting. Is it warm back there? Can you show of hands if it's too warm back there? Seems okay?
I'd like to welcome you all to the Committee of the Whole, and I will now call tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting to order. The procedures are as follows. I will ask the clerk to introduce an item, after which council will be given an opportunity to ask questions of staff. I will then ask, when that's finished, ask the applicant to present their application, following which I will invite public input. When you come to the mic, please give your name and address so that we can contact you in the future if need be. We would ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes, and you will notice when you get up that we have a little device on the desk there which has a red, a yellow, and a green light. Once you start, the green light will be on. The yellow light will go on when you have 1 minute left, and the red light will start to flash once your time is up. And we would ask you to at that point, wrap up your comments if you have not already done so. I would caution you when you come up that you make sure that anything you wish to say, you say it when you're at the mic. Our procedures bylaw only allows for one trip to the mic for an individual and no subsequent. If you have questions, I will make a note of them and I will get them answered after public input has been completed. After everybody has an opportunity to speak, I will also ask the applicant to return to the microphone if need be to clarify anything, and then the matter will be turned over to council for a decision. Following the committee of the whole, council will reconvene to consider any decisions that the committee of the whole have recommended to council. Madam Clerk, could you please introduce the first item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is consideration of allowing miniature goats on urban residential lots. The report of the Director of Planning is recommending that council proceed with option 3, which is community engagement process and pilot program, as further outlined in the report. This would provide for potential regulatory changes to allow for the keeping of miniature goats on the urban residential lots. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Murdoch has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our Director of Planning. Thank you very much for the report. I was very excited to see it come forward. as I'm sure a number of the folks in the audience were as well. My question is with respect to the recommendation. The suggestion is that because of the amount of work that council has endorsed as a priority, that if council were to support option 3, which is the recommended option, that some of those work priorities would have to be shifted in order to undertake consultation as well as the pilot project. And what I wondered is, how would council be aware or be made aware of what priorities shifted in favor of the consultation process?
In general, the items that would seem possible to defer in order for staff to undertake this work would be something along the lines of work on heritage, work on public art. There may be a delay in the initiation of a local area plan by a couple of months. We can certainly provide council with greater details on those if they're curious about that. As council is aware, there's also a list of items that have yet to be started work on, and again, those would still remain in their current status unless directed otherwise. So either you can just leave it with that kind of information, or we can certainly provide a report.
Thank you. The other question I have is with respect to the pilot period. And the 5th bullet in the overview for option 1 says that participants would be asked to sign an agreement that basically after 18 months, if council doesn't proceed, the goat's got to go. Seemed a little bit harsh to me. It'd be a bit like presenting somebody with a puppy and then saying, I'm sorry, time's up. I wondered if there was a way that maybe participants in the study could be grandfathered if their neighbors were supportive of the goat staying.
You certainly could do that as a site-specific option, so the animals bylaw would be amended to read as follows. The difficulty of that is, the question becomes, is that forever? Or is that just till the goats cease to exist, which can be anywhere from 8 to 18 years.
So we'd have a bit of time to figure it out. Okay, I appreciate that response. It was just my concern, thinking of Ms. McHugh in particular, that if council didn't move as expeditiously as we expected, that I hate for her to lose out on the goat after 18 months. So, thank you.
Councillor Platt has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have 5 questions, and I'll just work through them. Number 1, I think the question I would have first off is the nature of the report, is it the interpretation that this is being done as an agricultural enhancement or as a pet? Can you characterize that for me, please?
I believe that both intents are there, both as a pet and as well as, somebody may wish to get milk from the goat. So I think both are covered off.
Okay, thank you. Second question, regarding breeding, we've required that in the options going forward that the males would be neutered. Is the understanding that any female goats would be taken off-site to be bred?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, regarding the maintenance of animals, if there were concerns about animal welfare, would bylaw be involved or would this be reported to the SPCA?
We would be involved initially, but then yes, we would put the people in contact with the correct organization, hopefully for education to occur first and then enforcement if necessary.
Great, we're just clipping along here. This is good. Number 4, just curious, the 100-meter requirement, if you could base where that recommendation came from. Is it that what's done in Seattle, Denver, or is that a made in Saanich number?
It's a made in Saanich number. We were looking at just covering off the properties that were abutting or were one away in terms of noise and smell.
Okay, thank you. And last, probably the worst as far as that is, can you make any comment on, should council be aware, is there any limitation being suggested on properties that are currently in the EDPA and having goats?
Not as part of the trial, but I think if we were to take option 3 and investigate that with the public, that's part of the things that we would look at, is things that we know about now, and those things that come up through good conversations and dialogue with people about their concerns.
So if I may, Chair, as a follow-up to that question, so within the trial period, the understanding is that perhaps Ms. McHugh and 9 others would be selected. Would we exclude someone who's currently in the EDPA because of the concern about native species on their property?
I would hope that we would be able to cordon off the area in question first, as a first option, to allow them to have the goats and address EDPA issues. If there wasn't, it would be something we'd bring back to council and ask your direction on.
Okay, thank you very much for answering all those questions.
Thank you, Councilor Workman.
Thank you very much. Question to staff. Before I saw the staff report, I thought, why not? And if we're basing it on an individual, I thought, yes, but we don't zone or rezone on people, it's on use. And the question I would ask, help me, as we look through the process, in some ways it's almost mind-boggling, we're talking about a few goats, but the process, I imagine there's a good reason for it. And just off the top of your head, at what cost?
Comparably with staff time, the backyard chicken bylaw was done for around $2,000, and those were advertisement costs and room booking costs. So it was very affordable when you look at using staff. If you decide to prioritize staff's resources elsewhere and you want to hire a consultant, that's when you get into more substantial dollars.
Thank you.
Councilor Sanders.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I want to follow up with our planner, please. You mentioned that if staff does this, then there are other issues that have to be put aside. And of course, our planner, except agriculture, is the Arts and Heritage Planner as well. So I've already got a list of things that need 2 or 3 years in the hopper, and you were saying that they would just wait longer.
Correct.
Councilor Haynes.
Thank you, staff, for bringing this forward, and thank you for explaining the time that was taken, because I know that young dealing and others have been wondering, hey, what's happening to the goats? But clearly, staff have been busy, and this has got here as quickly as we could. So, as we look at option 1, and I have filtered in my mind the letters and concerns that have come in, one of the concerns has been about noise. The noise of existing chickens, as an example. Now there would be the noise of goats. Also with noise, there might be odour. The odour one could be addressed by the enclosure of the manure heaps, and I think that's intended in the use. The issue also came up of opportunistic rodents, rats, etc., which would presumably be addressed by correct feeding behaviour, correct control of the feed. That said, there's also a clause in here that before anybody could initiate a pilot project, that there would be written approval of all neighbours within 100 metres of the property. That's the stated item in option 1. With that in place, I'm wondering if we could embed in there an automatic survey that 6 months, 12 months, and then 18 months, if the neighbours could be given a survey by either staff or the goat owner in terms of the neighbour's experience of it. And at the same time, if there were problems of noise or odour or opportunistic rodents, would that be something that would be called in staff, because we do have a complaint-driven bylaw. So that would be a surveying system embedded in option 1.
At the end of option 1, we note in the next steps program, or the next steps section of the report, that we would bring back a summary report that would include consultation with the neighbours as well as the members of the pilot project. So yes, we could embed, and it would be additional work, but we could embed a survey at those set periods if council so wished.
Yes, I think what I'm trying to do here is explore a lower tasking approach, because without the option 3, which is a full survey, staff survey, if there's an opportunity to embed auto survey into this option 1, so that then I can move the recommendation for option 1 without option 3.
You could absolutely do that. What staff is suggesting is more than a survey process. So similar to when we went out and discussed with the community about backyard chickens, we went out and provided the facts as we knew them and requested people to provide us feedback, not assuming anything that they would tell us. From that, we learned a lot, and we improved the draft bylaw to the point where most people appeared to be supportive. We would propose a similar process for that in regard to goats. We just don't simply know right now how people feel about goats in the community. That's what the public consultation process as outlined in in option 2 and 3 is going out to the public and asking them what they think, what are their concerns, can we address those concerns or not. Just allowing the pilot to go by itself with an auto survey of immediate neighbors addresses those immediate concerns and gives us some good information, but it doesn't give us the broader community and their feelings. It just gives us some isolated pockets. And we can't guarantee, sample-wise, if that accurately reflects the broader community. So I would strongly recommend that you do both if you're going to do anything at all.
Okay, thank you for that recommendation, and I take it to heart. I'd just like to raise an additional question for you. If it's the neighbours around the goats that really see the impact of the goats, and yet neighbours far away from goats, they're not actually dealing with goats, they're dealing with the idea of goats. So how are they qualified to give an answer?
If this bylaw is applied across Saanich, it doesn't limit where goats could occur. So they might not have one today, they might not experience what it's like to live with a goat as a neighbour during the pilot project, but they still have and should have reasonable access to telling you how they feel about the notion in general, because they could wind up with one 6 months, 2 years from now. That's what we would be addressing.
So, having said that, here's another question. This is an 18-month pilot project before the bylaw would be enacted, is that correct?
Correct.
Right. So, would it not be possible to do option 1, and then depending on that, the results of option 1 after 18 months, then look at doing a broader survey of the residents of Saanich?
You could do that, but I would suggest that running them in parallel is far better. You're going to get more fulsome information in which to make your decision.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, we are the applicant, essentially in this one, so I'll ask the Director of Planning. We have a lot of questions for you. Do you have any additional comments you would like to make at this time?
We do not.
Thank you very much. In that case, I will open this up for public input. If any member of the public would like to speak to council, please come forward at this time. Hi.
I would like to say that it was a great report, and just one thing that I was noticing was that it said 100 meters away, and I feel like that might be a little bit excessive, just since I've actually measured. I did that.
Excuse me, do you mind if we have your name and address, although we probably mostly know it?
Jillian McHugh, and the address?
Yes, please.
Okay, 1813 Penshurst Road.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I actually measured today, and the neighbors that are 2 houses away are about 35 meters away. So 100 seems like that would be going pretty far.
I'll get an answer to you on that later.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haynes has a question for you, if you could come back to the mic.
Hi, thank you, Jim. Through the chair. So within the report here, there's some identification of the idea of breeding goats, although the males would be neutered, the females would be fertile. And there's some concern about embedded in the residents that in a breeding cycle, goats can have about 3 or 4 litters a year, and then they may have 2 to 5, 2 to 4 kids in a litter. That would be quite a lot of goats. So within your use, were you planning a breeding program? What is the program that you're planning, Jimmy?
I'm planning to have them as a pet, as well as they can help with eating some grass and ivy and other invasive plants. I wouldn't be planning on breeding because I don't know anything about that, and I feel like someone who knows more things about it should be doing it instead of someone who's an amateur at breeding.
So if there was a bylaw that came forward which modified that goats are pets, just like cats and dogs, you were not going into agricultural husbandry to raise goats for sale, would that trouble you in any way?
No.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. there anybody else who would like to address council on this particular item?
Allison Ross, 4038 South Valley Drive, speaking on behalf of the Residents Association of Strawberry Vale Marigold in Glanford. Our area is an area of larger lots, so this is of particular interest to us. And many of the concerns that I planned on raising tonight with council have actually been already addressed, but I'll run through them again. We support option 4, which is deferring this whole issue until 2017. And we do that for a number of reasons. We view this proposal as a low priority, and we are unconvinced as to its contribution to food security. A quick search of the internet suggests that pygmy and dwarf goats make good pets and can even be walked on a leash. And I don't think that we necessarily want farm animals strictly as pets in an urban setting. Apparently milking goats can be a bit of a challenge, and as the report from staff have indicated, there are some issues with unpasteurized goat milk that can lead to disease. And realistically, how much milk can 2 miniature goats produce? Add to the fact that goats are apparently excellent escape artists, so I'm not sure that a fence will actually contain them. And they are particularly fond of ornamentals. So if a goat, for example, got into my yard, it would do significant damage in the thousands of dollars. And of course, as has been previously mentioned, noise and odor concerns. So those are just a few of our concerns. But our main concern, and Councillor Murdoch touched on previously, and that is the allocation of scarce staff resources and or consultant dollars that could be better spent on higher priority items that will have a greater impact on a larger number of Saanich residents. And staff has already mentioned the update of the woefully out-of-date local area plans. So essentially, we're suggesting, we're not saying no, but we are saying not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I have one question from the first speaker, and that is the question about why 100 meters, and is that possibly excessive in terms of neighbors?
There's certainly no right and wrong. 100 meters was chosen because in comparison to chickens, we're dealing with a more substantial noise issue. The potential's there, they can be very quiet, but if they aren't, then the impact as the result of the goats being there is more substantial. And just to provide you a comparison, if you did 100 meters, and just to make it easier, you were on a grid pattern subdivision, you'd be looking at around 6 to 7 lots on either side of you. So if you looked at that in terms of left and right from your property, obviously when you're going behind you or in front of you, it gets even less because of the distance separation of the road. If you're looking on a grid pattern system in a 50-meter notification area, it would be 3 to 4 lots, both directions down the road from you.
Thank you. Councilor Plant, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just another question that came to mind as a result of the comments made by the last public speaker. Can you estimate, I know there's a figure in the report of about $2,500 when the chicken, one of the initiatives to explore consultation around poultry. Can you tell me what a cost estimate if we were to do this? I know we say it's a time, but what is that in money if we were to hire a consultant? What's the price tag? I'd like to know that before I vote tonight.
If you were looking at 3 open houses and consultation and asking them to come forward with a solution related to the bylaw, in other words, how do we do this, you could be in the range of $20,000 to $30,000.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to staff. Within the proposals here, it's it's Gillian plus 9 up to 10, and that additional parties interested in goats would be solicited for advertising. Aside from Gillian, has anybody spontaneously come forward and said yes, they'd like to join the waiting list for goats?
We've had one other member of the public come forward.
Right, so, okay. And we've had over a year now of some significant publicity about goats since this last came here and go to I'm just processing in my mind here. So it's not a secret that we're looking for interest or exploring the idea of goats. Within option 1, is there any facility in reducing the number of opportunities for people to have goats, to say 4 or 5? I'm still drawn to the idea that engaging in public consultation around the idea of goats without a pilot study of giving us experience of goats in Saanich, although we can draw on the goat experiences of other municipalities, I'm drawn to the idea of a pilot study and then seeing 18 months on from now, were there issues with the neighbours? Were there issues with noise, with rodents, with odours? Were there escape artists, the Houdini of goats, who ran down the road and ate all the flowers, which actually would be not a good thing. Really, I think you can see that. And there was a history of a goat, I believe in Victoria, who did escape, and it was eating a certain type of herb and led it to have a delirious sense of understanding, and it escaped, and it did get into, you didn't know this story? It was being fed the marijuana plants, and it escaped, and it was actually being kept by a University of Victoria professor. Who knew? This is going back in time now, but it did happen, so I'm just wondering if there's some flexibility in that, because I would like to maybe look at option 1 as a possible approach, followed by a possible option 3. Staff feedback, please.
You can absolutely do that. Given that over the course of the last year, 2 years, we've only had one person phone us, my concern is we may only get Gillian and one other person participating in the pilot. So the validity of the information obviously is less because you're not getting that consistent response that this is working or this one item isn't working. That's also the advantage of doing the other process in parallel, is there will be an overlap in information that you gain from each process. But there will also be distinct information that you gain. You gain, obviously, real-life experience of what's going on in a neighborhood. But when you just chat with people about the concept, you hear other things that you might not experience at that level, because sometimes people are afraid to say something to their neighbors who have goats. So you're getting that whole spectrum of information. We have to also acknowledge that some people aren't as comfortable, perhaps, participating in a feedback session when their next door neighbor is the person with goats and they don't want to be the person saying no. So to be fair and to provide a fulsome, transparent engagement process, both in staff's recommendation are necessary.
Through Chair, thank you, staff.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch. Mayor Atwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by thanking staff for a very thorough report, which I think considers virtually all aspects of owning goats in an urban environment. I think it is a very thorough and considerate report, and I appreciate the work that went into providing it and the recommendation. I also want to thank Gillian for her ongoing effort to bring this to council on numerous occasions, visiting a number of our advisory committees, and putting in more effort than probably most adults would in trying to raise an issue with City Hall and make a change in a bylaw. So my congratulations to you, if for no other reason than you've demonstrated a huge amount of civic responsibility and trying to change the rules in City Hall. So good for you. I think Gillian's parents are probably quite pleased the amount of time has elapsed to get her to this age if we're going to talk about goats breeding. Which did seem to come up as a topic of interest, and she seemed quite well informed on the subject, which she may not have been 3 years ago when she started this initiative. I tend to agree with Councillor Haynes' comments that I think what maybe makes sense in my mind is to allow the pilot project to get underway, to gather some feedback, to inform part of the public consultation process. I'm not saying don't do public consultation. I agree with the planner's comments that we're going to need broader feedback than that which we would receive just by the benefit of numerous pilot projects. But I think maybe the way to strike a balance here is allow the pilots to get underway, learn from the experience of the property owner and their neighbors, and then after some time has elapsed, perhaps 12 months or 18 months, then undertake the public consultation process. And I can appreciate that you may not get as broad, the broad level of information that you would get by doing both concurrently. But that's not to say that the pilot project couldn't continue during that period. So I view that as a way to move forward without further delay.